It has been 15 years since I graduated from the University of Cape Town with my business science, computer science degree, which gave me an awesome founding in business management and programming. And as I look at the last 15 years of my career, no one is more surprised than me in terms of how it actually panned out. I've managed to start 2 amazing businesses, support and mentored many others, been on platforms such as the World Economic Forum, actually met a couple of young girls that have been named after me, and now I'm here with you, the women of Target Elevate. When I reflect back on my journey and wonder how it all came to be, and try to unpack the purpose of my story, the relevance of my journey, I am drawn to a couple of simple facts. The reality is that the way we understand how value is created in the world today is changing. It is no longer about having something that nobody else has. It's about knowing who you are, being able to act in accordance with your highest values, being able to understand your blind spots and have the people around you to support you. It's about being able to suspend the assumptions about how you assume life to be and to be willing to question the things around you so you can have the courage or the foresight to create new assumptions. I had my first experience in questioning the world sometime during high school. I was in a geography class that I found terribly, terribly boring. And I was so bored that I was looking right outside the window into the sunlight, trying to blind myself. It was then that I probably had the first conscious conversation with myself. And I asked myself, what the hell are you doing? And what is this life thing really, really about? I reflected on my life journey so far. I went through a system called primary school, and now I was in another one called secondary school, and I'm supposed to go to another one called varsity, and then a corporate job. And I felt like I was playing systems my whole life and started to question, when do I stop this? When do I actually do me? So by the end of university, I was very clear on a couple of things, that I finally wanted to do something that was valuable from my perspective. I wanted to be able to decide how I gave my time and what I gave my attention to. Luckily, there were a couple of classmates in my varsity career at UCT who were just as desperate not to get a job, and we started Yego. As students, we never had enough money to make prepaid calls, and we thought the world was changing. Phones were getting smarter, there was Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. Surely, cheap or free calls should be possible on mobile phones. Yes, there was Skype, but it was meant for people with laptops and fiber, and we certainly didn't have those options. And so we started a journey that saw us launch some of the earliest mobile voice over IP applications in the world. And there's no faster learning journey than running your first startup. Some of the lessons I learned really started with leadership and managing people, probably the hardest part of my journey. And this is why I made sure that I got a coach early on in my career. And that was a transcendent experience for me because I finally got to appreciate just how differently other people see the world. And that how you lead, how you communicate has very little to do with how I see the world. And I needed to position everything from the perspective of the people I was leading and communicating to. I also learned a lot about networking. Initially, it was all about, attending as many events, picking up as many business cards as possible. But that wasn't natural or authentic to me. In the end, I opted to rather focus on building 1 or 2 valuable relationships at that occasion. And I started building that relationship by offering to help. And that built goodwill over time so that it was easy to be able to call on that person when the opportunity or the need arose. The other thing that I learned was that you can truly teach yourself absolutely everything by using the internet. We didn't know anything about how to build the software we wanted to build, but we literally Googled our way to success. I remember Googling how to set up a shareholders agreement, how to hire people, how to fire people. In my mind, there is no excuse today not to be able to build expertise in the things that you truly, truly care about. We also had an experience in Jaeger where we had to learn to pivot the business. We had started it much like a Skype.com at Jaeger.com, and it was really targeted at the consumer market. But if you can recall a time before Android and iPhones in 2006 and 2007, People didn't have app stores, they didn't put credit cards on their phone, so they couldn't really buy stuff, and we couldn't monetize that kind of business model. And we realized we needed to pivot to a B2B model. Since none of us had worked in corporate, we just didn't know how that kind of market worked. And so we sought to find a partner who ultimately bought a majority stake in Yego and was able to take those products to market. I've learned a lot from the Yego days, and I've taken those learnings into my future businesses. With Rekindle Learning, the dream is essentially to provide digital learning platforms that truly empower people to learn better. At the beginning, I really felt that the kind of e-learning tools that were available were just focusing on digitizing content. They were not fundamentally changing how people consumed the material or whether learning outcomes were achieved better or faster. And in the world we're living in today of rapid change, my dream is to ensure that people are able to continuously adapt to this new world of work. In starting Rekindle Learning, I also didn't focus as much on building the product and years into the software right up front. I wanted to go to market and engage customers as soon as possible, which was the opposite of what I'd done at Yego. And this way allowed me to focus my attention on the B2B go-to-market strategy, as opposed to spending all the energy on product, which is so easy to do as an entrepreneur. And it only occurs much later on that the most important part of a business is the go-to-market strategy. And the product, even if it's not great, will survive if the distribution and go-to-market actually works. As my parting words to you, the women of Target Elevate, I really want to share that as you go on to the world and try and stamp your signature and footprint into the world, start by focusing on your own world perspective and acting in accordance to your highest values, because that's what allows you to sustain and push through the long journey of delivering change and innovation. One of my favorite authors and investors and entrepreneurs, Paul Graham, says that if you look at the way successful founders have had their ideas, it is generally a result of an external stimulus hitting a prepared mind. The verb you want to be using with respect to coming up with ideas is not think up, but notice. And that, for me, is a case of self-awareness and the ability to pause and reflect. He gives us the example of Dropbox and how Drew Houston kept forgetting his USB stick at home. And that was his external stimulus. And instead of accepting the situation, assuming that given that his seniors at university were doing the same thing, and this had to be the way of life, he paused to challenge that assumption and ultimately used his web technology skills that he had been building, his prepared mind, and used that to build Dropbox. Paul Graham goes on to say that whoever you are, you have a sum total of life experiences that have prepared you to notice the opportunities around you. And that is an incredible thing, because it means that your life journey, the things that you've experienced that have prepared you, give you a unique perspective of the world that is truly your most compelling competitive advantage. I believe that the best ideas don't come from reading the Harvard Business Review, but by being able to pause and reflect, notice the things that you were told are the way it is, but it doesn't have to be so. It's the ability to separate yourself from the circumstances that you face, the things that seem like they should be there and will always be like that, and be able to suspend that fixed reality so that you're willing to assume that reality is malleable, changeable, can be turned into something else. Creating that space for innovation where your capacity for authentic innovation and change can begin. You are the change that you have been looking for. So I encourage you for the remainder of your program to truly tap into your unique world perspective and how you choose to make a contribution to the world.